The dust rose in lazy spirals around Hannah Abbott's worn boots as she stood beside the stagecoach, her black morning dress already gray with the dirt of Independence, Missouri, and she wondered if leaving would finally stop the whispers that followed her everywhere like shadows. The driver was strapping her trunk to the back of the coach, the leather creaking in the hot July sun of 1878. Hannah clutched her reticule tightly, feeling the weight of her late husband's pocket watch inside. 3 months had passed since Thomas died, 3 months of suspicious glances and cruel gossip that suggested she had something to do with his death. The truth was far simpler and far sadder. Thomas had been sick for years, his lungs weak from working in the mines before they married, and pneumonia had taken him one cold April night, but people believed what they wanted to believe. In a town like Independence, a young widow of 24 was either a victim or a villain, and the ladies of the church had decided which one Hannah was. So she was leaving, heading east to St. Louis, where her aunt ran a boarding house and had promised her work and a fresh start. "All ready, madam," the driver said, tipping his hat. "We leave in 5 minutes. Best get yourself settled inside." Hannah nodded and took one last look at the town that had been her home for 6 years, the mercantile where she had worked after marrying Thomas, the church where they had wed, the small house at the edge of town that now belonged to someone else because she could not afford to keep it. Everything she owned was in that trunk or in her hands. She was about to step up into the coach when she heard hoofbeats, fast and urgent. Hannah turned, shading her eyes against the sun, and saw a rider coming hard down the main street. Dust billowed behind the horse, a magnificent chestnut that moved like wind across the prairie. The rider pulled up so sharply that the horse reared slightly, and Hannah stepped back, her heart suddenly pounding. She recognized him immediately. Matthew Lewis. Everyone in Independence knew Matthew Lewis. He owned a ranch 10 miles outside of town, ran cattle and horses, and kept mostly to himself except when he came in for supplies. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of storm clouds. Hannah had seen him perhaps a dozen times in all the years she had lived here, and they had never spoken more than a polite greeting. Now he was swinging down from his horse, his boots hitting the ground with purpose and walking straight toward her. "Don't go," he said. Hannah stared at him. "Excuse me." "Don't go," Matthew repeated. His chest was rising and falling quickly like he had been running. "Please, don't get on that stagecoach." The driver looked between them with interest. A few townspeople had stopped to watch. Hannah felt heat rising in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the summer sun. "Mr. Lewis, I don't understand what business this is of yours." "I know you don't," he said. "I know we have barely spoken, but I am asking you not to leave." "The stage is leaving," the driver said. "If you are coming, madam, we need to go now." Hannah looked at the open door of the coach, then back at Matthew Lewis. His face was earnest, almost desperate. She could not fathom why. "Why?" she asked simply. Matthew took a breath. "Because I have been a coward for 6 months, and if I let you leave without speaking, I will regret it for the rest of my life." Hannah's breath caught. 6 months. That was before Thomas died, before everything fell apart. "I have to go," she whispered. "No, you don't. Stay." "Give me a chance to explain." "Last call," the driver announced. Hannah felt torn in two. Part of her wanted to climb into that coach and never look back at this town and its painful memories. But another part, a part she had thought died with Thomas, was curious. What could Matthew Lewis possibly have to say to her? She made her decision in a heartbeat. "Take my trunk off," the driver sighed. "Madam, I already secured it." "Then unsecure it. I'm not going." Matthew's face transformed. The tension in his shoulders eased and something like hope flickered in his eyes. The driver grumbled but began untying her trunk. The gathered townspeople murmured among themselves. Hannah ignored them all, focusing only on the man in front of her. "You better have a good explanation," she said quietly. "I do. But not here. Will you come with me? Somewhere we can talk properly." Hannah knew what that would look like, the widow riding off with Matthew Lewis. But she had already decided to leave this town behind, and what did their opinions matter now? All right. Matthew's horse was too tall for her to mount in her long skirts, so he helped her up first, then swung up behind her. Hannah had never been so close to him before. She could feel the warmth of him at her back, smell the scent of leather and sage and something else, something clean and masculine. Her trunk sat in the dust where the driver had dropped it. "I will send someone for your things," Matthew said near her ear. "Hold on." He urged the horse into a smooth canter, and they left the stagecoach and the staring townspeople behind. Hannah felt like she was in a dream, everything unreal and strange. Just minutes ago, she had been leaving forever, and now she was riding through Independence with a man who was nearly a stranger, heading toward an unknown destination. They rode past the edge of town and onto the open prairie. The land stretched endlessly in all directions, golden grass rippling in the wind. Matthew guided the horse with easy confidence, and Hannah tried not to think about how it felt to be held in the circle of his arms, even in this practical way. After about 20 minutes, they came to a creek lined with cottonwood trees. Matthew dismounted and helped Hannah down. Her legs felt shaky, though whether from the ride or from the strangeness of the situation, she could not say. "This is my land," Matthew said. "The ranch house is another mile north, but I thought you might prefer somewhere neutral for this conversation." That was considerate. Hannah smoothed her skirts, trying to compose herself. "Now please explain why you stopped me from leaving." Matthew took off his hat and ran a hand through his hair. In the dappled shade beneath the cottonwoods, he looked younger, less sure of himself. "I should start at the beginning. That would help," he smiled slightly. "I saw you for the first time about a year ago. You were coming out of the mercantile with packages in your arms. One of them was slipping, about to fall, and you caught it with your knee while you adjusted your grip. It was such a small thing, but I remember thinking how capable you looked, how graceful." Hannah remembered that day, though she had not known he was watching. "Go on." "I asked around about you. Found out you were married to Thomas Abbott, that you worked at the mercantile part-time, that you sang in the church choir. I told myself that was the end of it. You were married, and I was not the kind of man who pursued married women. But you kept watching. Not intentionally, but Independence is not a large town. I would see you now and then, and every time I did, I felt this pull. I tried to ignore it. I knew it was wrong." Hannah's throat felt tight. "Thomas was a good man." "I am sure he was. I am not trying to dishonor his memory. I just need you to understand that what I feel for you, it did not begin yesterday or last week. It has been growing for months, even when I had no right to feel it. You did not even know me. I know. That is why I never approached you. What could I say? I was captivated by a woman I had never spoken to who was married to someone else. It was impossible. Then Thomas died." Matthew nodded. "I heard the news. I wanted to pay my respects, but I was afraid. Afraid that seeing you grieving would break something in me. Afraid that people would see what I felt written on my face. So I stayed away, and I hated myself for it." The creek burbled softly over stones. Somewhere a bird called out, sharp and clear. Hannah tried to process what she was hearing. "You still have not explained why you stopped the stagecoach." "Yesterday I was in town, getting supplies. I overheard some women talking outside the church. They were saying terrible things about you, saying you had probably poisoned your husband, that you were leaving town because of guilt." Matthew's jaw tightened. I wanted to confront them, but I knew that would only make things worse, so I asked the blacksmith about you instead. He mentioned casually that you were leaving on today's stage, and you rode all night to stop me. No. I sat up all night arguing with myself about whether I had any right to interfere in your life. By dawn, I had convinced myself to let you go. You deserved a fresh start, away from the gossip and pain. But then I was saddling my horse to ride out to check the fences, and I just kept thinking, what if? What if I let you leave and never knew if there could have been something between us? What if you left believing all those ugly lies, thinking no one in Independence saw your worth? Hannah felt tears prick her eyes. You barely know me. Then let me know you. Stay. Not in town if you do not want to face those people. Stay at my ranch. I have a housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, who lives in a cottage on the property. She would be a proper chaperone. You could have your own space, your own time to grieve and heal. And when you are ready, if you are ever ready, maybe we could see if what I feel might grow into something mutual. It was too much, too fast. Hannah turned away from him, pressing her hands to her face. Her whole life had been planned out. She would go to St. Louis, work in her aunt's boarding house, live quietly and respectfully as a widow should. It would be safe, predictable, lonely. This offer from Matthew was none of those things. I am still in mourning, she said. I know. I am not asking you to stop grieving. I am just asking you not to leave. People will talk. People are already talking. Let them. Hannah turned back to face him. Why do you care so much? You said yourself we have never truly spoken. How can you possibly feel this strongly about someone you do not know? Matthew stepped closer. I cannot explain it in a way that makes rational sense. I just know that when I saw you about to leave, it felt like the world was tilting wrong. Like I was about to lose something precious that I had never even had the chance to hold. Maybe that makes me crazy. Maybe I should have stayed at the ranch and let you go, but I could not. Some instinct deeper than thought drove me into town, and when I saw you standing there, I knew I had to try. Hannah searched his face. He looked back at her steadily, hiding nothing. There was vulnerability in his expression, but also strength. This was a man who had faced his own doubts and fears and chosen to act anyway. I do not know if I can be what you want, she said softly. Thomas has only been gone 3 months. My heart is still broken. I am not asking for your heart, not yet. I am just asking for time. A chance. The sun was rising higher, heating the air. Hannah could hear the creak, the wind in the grass, her own pulse beating in her ears. This moment felt suspended, fragile as glass. Whatever she decided now would change everything. She thought about the stagecoach rolling away without her, about her aunt waiting in St. Louis, expecting her arrival, about the trunk sitting in the dust in Independence, all her worldly possessions in a single box. About Thomas, buried in the church cemetery under a simple stone marker. Then she thought about Matthew riding through the night, wrestling with himself, about the desperate hope in his voice when he said, "Don't go," about the possibility of something new growing from the ruins of her old life. All right, she said. I will stay, for a little while at least, to see if this madness of yours has any foundation. Matthew's smile was like the sun coming out. Thank you. You will not regret it, I swear. I might, but I suppose I will never know if I do not try. They rode to the ranch together, still doubled on his horse. The land rolled gently, dotted with cattle that raised their heads to watch them pass. Hannah could see the ranch house in the distance, a sprawling structure of wood and stone that looked solid and welcoming. There was a barn, a corral with horses, a vegetable garden, and a smaller cottage set apart from the main house. That is where Mrs. Chen lives, Matthew said, pointing to the cottage. She has been with me for 5 years now. Her husband worked on the ranch until he died of a fever 2 years ago. I offered to let her stay on. She keeps house and cooks, and in return she has a home and a salary. That was kind of you. She is good company. You will like her." A woman emerged from the cottage as they approached, shading her eyes. She was small and neat, with gray-streaked black hair pulled back in a bun. When she saw Matthew with a woman on his horse, her eyebrows rose. Matthew dismounted and helped Hannah down. "Mrs. Chen, this is Mrs. Hannah Abbott. She's going to be staying with us for a while as our guest." "Hannah, this is Mrs. Lily Chen." Mrs. Chen looked between them with sharp, intelligent eyes. "Welcome, Mrs. Abbott. This is unexpected." "For me as well," Hannah said honestly. "I hope my presence will not be an inconvenience." "Not at all. We have plenty of room. I will prepare the guest bedroom." Mrs. Chen turned to Matthew. "Her luggage, still in town. I will send someone to fetch it." "I see. Well, come inside, Mrs. Abbott. You look like you could use some tea and a moment to collect yourself." Hannah followed Mrs. Chen into the main house gratefully. The interior was surprisingly refined, with good furniture and polished floors. Clearly Matthew was a man of some means. Mrs. Chen led her to a sitting room and disappeared to make tea. Matthew had followed them in. "I need to send one of the hands to town for your trunk. Will you be all right here for a bit?" "Yes, thank you." After he left, Hannah sank into a chair and tried to understand what had just happened. This morning she had been leaving Missouri forever. Now she was sitting in a stranger's house, having agreed to stay because that stranger had feelings for her. It was absurd. It was terrifying. It was also the first spark of something like hope she had felt since Thomas died. Mrs. Chen returned with tea and small cakes. She poured for both of them and sat across from Hannah with the air of someone preparing for a serious conversation. "I will be direct, Mrs. Abbott, because I think you prefer honesty. What are your intentions toward Mr. Lewis?" Hannah nearly choked on her tea. "I beg your pardon. He is a good man. He has been alone too long, and he does not let people close easily. If you are here to toy with him or use him for shelter until something better comes along, I would ask you to leave now and save you both the pain." Hannah set down her teacup carefully. "Mrs. Chen, I assure you I have no intentions at all yet. This entire situation came about so quickly that I have barely processed it. Mr. Lewis stopped my stagecoach less than 2 hours ago. Before that, we had never had a conversation." Mrs. Chen's expression softened slightly. "He stopped your stagecoach, rode up and asked me not to leave. My goodness, he must feel strongly indeed." Mrs. Chen sipped her tea thoughtfully. "I have worked for Mr. Lewis for 5 years, and I have never seen him show interest in a woman. He is married to this ranch, I always thought. For him to act so boldly, you must be very special. Or he must be very foolish. Perhaps. Time will tell." Mrs. Chen smiled. "But I think you are both brave. Bravery is a good foundation." Hannah spent the rest of the day settling into the guest room, a pleasant space with windows overlooking the prairie. Her trunk arrived in the late afternoon, brought by one of the ranch hands who tipped his hat and said nothing about the strange circumstances. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her dresses in the wardrobe and placing Thomas's pocket watch on the bedside table. She had not spoken to Matthew since the morning. He was working somewhere on the ranch, Mrs. Chen explained, and would join them for dinner. Hannah appreciated the space. She needed time to think, to grieve, to understand her own feelings. Dinner was a quiet affair. Matthew had washed and changed into clean clothes, and he sat at the head of the table while Hannah and Mrs. Chen sat on either side. The food was simple but good, roasted chicken and vegetables from the garden. "How are you finding the room?" Matthew asked. "It is lovely. Thank you for your hospitality. You are welcome to stay as long as you need." They ate in silence for a while. Hannah could feel Matthew glancing at her occasionally, but he did not push for conversation. She was grateful for that. The enormity of what she had done was settling on her shoulders like a weight. She had stayed. She had agreed to let a near stranger court her while she was still wearing widow's weeds. What would Thomas think? But Thomas was gone and she was still alive. She had to find a way to keep living. After dinner, Matthew invited her to walk outside. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. They strolled toward the corral where several horses stood, dark shapes against the fading light. "Tell me about Thomas," Matthew said. Hannah was surprised. "Why?" "Because he was important to you. If I am to know you, I should know about the people who shaped your life." Hannah leaned against the corral fence. "We met when I was 18. He worked at the general store, and I had just arrived in Independence with my parents. We were supposed to be passing through on our way to Oregon, but my father got sick. He died a month later. My mother followed him 6 months after that. Thomas was kind to me during all of that. He courted me properly and married me when I turned 19. Were you happy?" "Yes." "We were not passionate, but we were content. He was steady and good. When he got sick, I nursed him as best I could, but his lungs were already damaged from his time in the mines before I knew him. The doctor said there was nothing to be done. I am sorry. So am I." Hannah looked out at the darkening prairie. "The worst part is not the grief, though that is hard enough. It is the way people looked at me after, like I was somehow responsible, like a young woman could not possibly be widowed through natural causes. People are cruel when they are afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of the randomness of death. If they can blame someone, make it seem like the deceased brought it on themselves or was murdered, then they do not have to face the truth that death can come for any of us at any time." Hannah turned to look at him. "That is a surprisingly philosophical observation." Matthew shrugged. "I've had a lot of time to think out here. The prairie has a way of putting things in perspective." "How long have you had this ranch?" 8 years. I bought it when I was 22 with money I saved working cattle drives. It was not much then, just a small house and 100 acres. I have built it up over time." "You are 30 now then?" "Yes, and you are 24 if my sources were correct." "Your sources being the town gossips," he smiled. "Something like that." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge. Hannah felt something loosening in her chest, a tension she had been carrying for months. Maybe it was the open sky, or maybe it was the presence of someone who seemed to understand her pain without judgment. "I should go in," she said eventually. "It has been a very long day." "Of course. Sleep well, Hannah." It was the first time he had used her given name, and it sent a small shiver through her. "Good night, Matthew." The days developed a rhythm. Hannah would wake early and help Mrs. Chen with breakfast. Matthew would eat quickly and head out to work on the ranch, sometimes gone all day. Hannah would spend her time reading, sewing, or helping in the garden. In the evenings after dinner, she and Matthew would walk or sit on the porch and talk. They talked about everything. Matthew told her about growing up in Texas, the son of a cattle rancher who drank too much and died in a fight when Matthew was 15. He told her about the cattle drives, the vast distances and the danger and the strange beauty of it all. He told her about his dreams for the ranch, how he wanted to breed horses and build something lasting. Hannah told him about her childhood in Ohio, about her parents' dream of a new life in Oregon that died with them. She told him about her love of books, about the little school she had attended where a kind teacher had opened worlds to her through stories. She told him about Thomas, about the quiet years of their marriage, about the pain of watching him fade. As the weeks passed, Hannah found herself thinking of Thomas less with grief and more with gentle fondness. The sharp edges of her loss were softening. She began to notice things about Matthew, the way his face lit up when he talked about the horses, the gentleness in his hands when he handled the animals, the quiet strength that seemed to radiate from him. One evening in late August, they were sitting on the porch watching a storm approach. The air was electric with the promise of rain, and lightning flickered on the horizon. "I need to tell you something," Matthew said. Hannah's heart quickened. "All right. I know you have only been here a month. I know it is too soon, but I cannot keep pretending that my feelings are not growing stronger every day." He turned to face her. "I am falling in love with you, Hannah. Maybe I was already halfway there before we ever spoke. But now, knowing you, spending time with you, I am certain I love you." Hannah's breath caught. She had known this was coming, had felt the pull between them growing stronger. But hearing the words spoken aloud made them real in a way that frightened her. "Matthew, I cannot. I am still in mourning. I know. I am not asking you to love me back, not yet. I just needed you to know the truth of what I feel." The first drops of rain began to fall, fat and heavy. They would need to go inside soon, but Hannah could not move. She was frozen between fear and desire, between the past and the possibility of a future. "What if I cannot love you?" she whispered. "What if my heart is too broken?" Matthew reached out and took her hand. His palm was warm and calloused. "Then I will wait, and if the day comes when you tell me you can never return my feelings, I will accept it. But until then, I will hope." The rain came harder, drumming on the porch roof. Hannah looked down at their joined hands. When was the last time someone had touched her with such tenderness? Thomas had been sick for so long, and before that their affection had been mild, comfortable. This felt different, electric, like the storm. "I am afraid," she admitted. "So am I." "Of what?" "That you will leave. That I will lose you before I ever really had you." Hannah squeezed his hand. "I am not going anywhere. Not yet." That night, lying in bed listening to the rain, Hannah let herself think about Matthew as more than a friend or a host. She thought about his smile, rare but transformative. She thought about his voice, deep and steady. She thought about the way he looked at her like she was something precious. And she thought about her own heart, which she had believed was finished with love. Maybe it was not. Maybe it was just resting, gathering strength for something new. The next morning dawned clear and fresh. Hannah woke with a sense of purpose. She dressed and went downstairs to find Matthew already up, standing in the kitchen with Mrs. Chen. "I want to learn to ride," Hannah announced. Matthew and Mrs. Chen both turned to stare at her. "You do not know how to ride?" Matthew asked. "I can sit on a horse if someone leads me, but I cannot ride properly, and if I am going to stay here, even temporarily, I should know how." Matthew's face broke into a grin. "I will teach you after breakfast." "After breakfast." Mrs. Chen watched them with poorly concealed amusement. "You two are dancing around each other like shy teenagers." "Mrs. Chen," Matthew said with mock severity, "that is hardly professional." "I am too old to be professional. I call things as I see them." She turned to Hannah. "He is a good teacher. Patient. You will be riding across the prairie in no time." After breakfast, Matthew led Hannah to the corral. He had already saddled a gentle mare named Daisy, a sweet-tempered animal with kind eyes. "The most important thing is to relax," Matthew said. "Horses sense fear. If you are tense, she will be tense." He helped Hannah mount, his hands steady on her waist. Once she was seated, he adjusted her posture, showed her how to hold the reins, explained the basic commands. Then he mounted his own horse and led her around the corral at a walk. Hannah felt clumsy and uncertain at first, but gradually she began to understand the rhythm of it. The horse's movement, the subtle shifts in balance, the way a gentle pressure could guide the animal. Matthew circled with her, offering encouragement and corrections. "You are a natural," he said after an hour. "Want to try outside the corral?" Hannah's heart fluttered with nervousness, but she nodded. Matthew opened the gate and led her out onto the open prairie. They walked side by side, the horses moving easily through the tall grass. "How does it feel?" Matthew asked. "Free," Hannah said, surprised by the truth of it. "Like I could ride forever and never run out of space. That is what I love about it. Out here, you are not bound by walls or roads or other people's expectations. You can just be." They rode for an hour, staying at a walk so Hannah could build her confidence. When they returned to the ranch, she was tired but exhilarated. Matthew helped her dismount, and for a moment they stood close, his hand still on her waist. "Thank you," Hannah said softly. "Any time." Their faces were inches apart. Hannah could feel the warmth of his breath. It would be so easy to lean in to close the distance. But she pulled back, and Matthew let her go without protest. The riding lessons became a daily ritual. Hannah improved quickly, graduating from a walk to a trot, and then to a canter. She loved the speed and power of it, the way the wind whipped her hair and made her feel alive in a way she had not felt in years. She and Matthew would ride out in the mornings, exploring different parts of the ranch. He showed her the creek where they had first talked, the northern pastures where the cattle grazed, the rocky outcropping that offered a view for miles in every direction. One September morning, they rode to a meadow filled with wildflowers. The summer heat was breaking, and the air had a crisp edge that promised autumn. Hannah dismounted and walked among the flowers, running her hands over their petals. "This is beautiful," she said. Matthew had dismounted too. He stood watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "It is." Hannah turned to face him. "Why do you look at me like that?" "Like what?" "Like I am something you are trying to memorize." He crossed the distance between them slowly. "Because every moment with you feels important, I do not want to forget a single one." Hannah's pulse quickened. "Matthew." "I know. I am sorry. I do not mean to make you uncomfortable." "You do not make me uncomfortable. You make me feel things I thought I would never feel again." "What kind of things?" She reached up and touched his face, the first time she had initiated physical contact. His skin was warm beneath her fingers, rough with stubble. Alive, hopeful, frightened. Matthew covered her hand with his. "I am frightened too. Loving you is terrifying. Because I might not love you back. Because I have never felt this way before, and I do not know how to protect myself if it goes wrong." Hannah stepped closer. "I cannot make you any promises. I am still healing. I am still finding myself again after everything that happened. I know. But I can tell you that I care for you. More than I thought possible. And that scares me because caring leads to vulnerability, and vulnerability leads to pain." "Not always," Matthew said. "Sometimes it leads to joy." Hannah looked up at him. His eyes were so earnest, so full of hope and fear and love. She made her decision. She kissed him. It was gentle at first, tentative, a question more than a declaration. But Matthew responded with a hunger that matched something awakening in her. His arms came around her, pulling her close, and Hannah let herself sink into the embrace. She had not been held like this since Thomas died, had not felt desire stirring in her blood, had not wanted to lose herself in another person. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Matthew rested his forehead against hers. "Tell me this is real," he said. "It is real. I am here and I am choosing this, choosing you. You are still in mourning. I know. And I will always carry Thomas in my heart, but he would not want me to stop living. He would want me to find happiness again." Matthew kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips again. "I will spend every day trying to make you happy. You already do." They stayed in the meadow for hours, talking and kissing and simply being together. When they finally rode back to the ranch, something fundamental had shifted. They were no longer two people circling each other cautiously. They were together, committed to exploring this connection wherever it might lead. Mrs. Chen took one look at them and smiled. "About time." Over the following weeks, Hannah and Matthew grew closer in every way. They still maintained propriety, with Hannah sleeping in her own room and Mrs. Chen as chaperone, but the air between them crackled with connection. They would sit close during meals, hands touching. They would steal kisses in the barn or the garden. They would lie on the porch at night, looking at the stars and making plans for the future. "I want to marry you," Matthew said one evening in early October. "I know it is too soon, that you should wait longer for propriety's sake, but I want you to know my intentions are honorable." Hannah was lying with her head on his shoulder. "I want to marry you too." "But you are right, it is too soon. People would talk. Let them talk." "I do not want our marriage to be shadowed by gossip. I have had enough of that," Matthew sighed. "How long should we wait? Thomas died in April. By next spring it will have been a year. That seems respectable enough." "That is 6 months away, I know. Can you wait that long?" He kissed the top of her head. "I would wait forever for you. 6 months is nothing." But waiting was harder than either of them anticipated. They were in love, completely and desperately, and the enforced distance was torture. Hannah took to sleeping with her door open, just so she could hear Matthew moving around in his room down the hall. Matthew threw himself into ranch work, exhausting himself so he could sleep without dreaming of her. In November, the first snow came. Hannah woke to a world transformed, everything white and pristine. She dressed warmly and went outside to find Matthew already up, standing in the yard and looking at the sky. "I love the first snow," he said when she joined him. "It feels like a fresh start." Hannah slipped her hand into his. "We have had a lot of fresh starts this year, and I am grateful for everyone." They spent the day inside, the cold too bitter for outdoor work. Mrs. Chen made hot soup and fresh bread, and they all sat around the fire, warm and content. Hannah worked on a quilt she was making, a wedding gift for herself and Matthew when the time came. Matthew carved a piece of wood, shaping it slowly into the form of a horse. "What will you do with that when you finish?" Hannah asked. "Give it to our children, maybe." Hannah looked up sharply. "You want children? Yes, do you not?" "I do. I always did. Thomas and I tried, but it never happened. The doctor said it was likely his illness that prevented it." Matthew set down his carving. "I would love to have children with you, a house full of noise and laughter." "How many?" "As many as we are blessed with. 2, 4, 6. I do not care as long as they are ours." Hannah felt tears prick her eyes. She had given up on the dream of being a mother. Now it was blooming to life again, vivid and possible. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." The winter deepened. December came, bringing brutal cold and more snow. The ranch work was harder in winter, but Matthew managed it with the help of his ranch hands. Hannah stayed busy with indoor tasks, cooking and cleaning and sewing. She also began teaching, taking on pupils from nearby farms who came twice a week for lessons in reading and arithmetic. Christmas arrived, and Mrs. Chen prepared a feast. Hannah gave Matthew a new hat she had made, lined with fur to keep out the cold. Matthew gave her a beautiful saddle, custom made to fit her perfectly. "Now you can ride anywhere you want," he said. "You are not tethered to me anymore. I will always choose to ride with you." They kissed under the mistletoe Mrs. Chen had hung, and for a moment the world was perfect. January and February crawled by. Hannah marked off the days on a calendar, counting down to spring. She had decided that April would be the right time to marry, a year after Thomas's death. It felt appropriate somehow, a cycle completing. In March, Matthew began making plans for the wedding. He wanted to do it properly with a ceremony and celebration, but Hannah had a different idea. "I do not want a big wedding," she said one evening. "I do not want the townspeople staring and judging. I want something small and private." "What do you have in mind?" "Just us, Mrs. Chen, the minister, here at the ranch. We can have a celebration later if you want, but the ceremony itself should be intimate. Matthew considered this. I like it. Just the people who matter most. Exactly. They set the date for April 15th, exactly 1 year and 1 day after Thomas died. Hannah wrote to her aunt in St. Louis, explaining everything. Her aunt wrote back with congratulations and understanding, saying she was happy Hannah had found love again. The final weeks before the wedding flew by. Hannah made herself a new dress, not white since she was a widow remarrying, but a beautiful deep blue that matched her eyes. Mrs. Chen helped her with the finishing touches, adding delicate embroidery to the cuffs and collar. Matthew had a new suit made in town, and he polished his best boots until they gleamed. He also worked on the house, making small improvements and repairs, wanting everything to be perfect for his bride. The night before the wedding, Hannah could not sleep. She lay in bed, thinking about everything that had brought her to this moment. The pain of losing her parents, the quiet years with Thomas, the agony of his death and the cruelty that followed, the desperate decision to leave, and Matthew riding up to the stagecoach and saying, "Don't go." If he had been 5 minutes later, she would have been gone. Her entire life would have taken a different path. She would be in St. Louis now, working in her aunt's boarding house, living a half-life of safety and loneliness. Instead, she was here, about to marry a man who loved her with fierce devotion. About to start a new chapter filled with possibility. She got out of bed and padded barefoot down the hall to Matthew's room. She knocked softly. "Come in," he said. He was sitting up in bed, clearly also unable to sleep. His chest was bare, and in the lamplight he looked both vulnerable and strong. "I could not sleep," Hannah said. "Neither could I." She crossed the room and sat on the edge of his bed. "Are you nervous? Terrified?" "What if I am not a good husband? What if I cannot make you happy?" Hannah took his hand. "You already make me happy every day. I have no doubts about tomorrow." "None." "Well, maybe a few, but they are the normal kind, the what-if kind, not the should-I kind." Matthew pulled her closer. "Stay with me tonight." "Not like that, just close. I need to hold you." Hannah knew she should return to her own room, that it was not proper, but propriety seemed less important than comfort. She climbed into bed beside him, and he wrapped his arms around her. "Tomorrow you will be my wife," he murmured into her hair. "Tomorrow you will be my husband." They fell asleep like that, tangled together, peaceful. The wedding day dawned clear and warm, an unseasonably beautiful April day. Mrs. Chen woke them early, shooing Matthew out so Hannah could prepare. She helped Hannah into her blue dress, arranged her hair, and pronounced her beautiful. "You look happy," Mrs. Chen said. "Truly happy." "I am." "Good. Mr. Lewis deserves happiness, and so do you." The ceremony was held in the parlor. The minister from town had agreed to come despite the unusual circumstances, perhaps because Matthew had made a generous donation to the church. He spoke briefly about love and commitment, then asked them to exchange vows. Matthew took Hannah's hands. "I vow to love you all the days of my life, to protect you, cherish you, and stand beside you through whatever comes. You saved me from loneliness, and I will spend forever being grateful that I found the courage to ask you not to go." Hannah's voice shook slightly as she spoke. "I vow to love you with all that I am, to build a life with you, to give you the family you dream of, to face each day with you as my partner. You gave me hope when I had none, and I will treasure that gift always." They exchanged simple gold bands, and the minister pronounced them husband and wife. Matthew kissed her thoroughly, and Mrs. Chen applauded. "Welcome to the family, Mrs. Lewis," she said. That night, alone in their room together for the first time as husband and wife, Matthew and Hannah consummated their marriage with tenderness and passion. It was different from what Hannah had known with Thomas, more intense, more connected. She felt cherished in Matthew's arms, desired and loved. Afterward, lying in the darkness with his heartbeat steady beneath her ear, Hannah whispered, "Thank you." "For what?" "For not letting me leave. For being brave enough to take a chance on someone you barely knew. Best decision I ever made. Even though you did not know if I would stay. Even though some things are worth the risk." Life settled into a new pattern. Hannah was fully part of the ranch now, helping with everything from bookkeeping to branding cattle. She continued teaching the local children, holding classes in the ranch house parlor. Matthew worked hard, but always made time for his wife, whether it was riding out together or simply sitting on the porch at the end of the day. In June, Hannah discovered she was pregnant. She told Matthew one evening after dinner, pulling him aside with barely contained excitement. "Are you certain?" he asked, his face transformed with joy. "As certain as I can be. Mrs. Chen noticed before I did, actually. Apparently I have been looking queasy in the mornings." Matthew picked her up and spun her around, laughing. "We are having a baby." "We are having a baby," Hannah confirmed, laughing with him. The pregnancy was healthy and uneventful. Hannah felt well most of the time, just tired and emotional. Matthew became even more protective, barely letting her lift anything heavy and fretting over every small discomfort. "I am not made of glass," Hannah told him one day when he insisted she sit down after 5 minutes of weeding the garden. "I know, but you are carrying something precious, and I will not take any chances." Their daughter was born in February of 1880 in the midst of a snowstorm. Mrs. Chen helped with the delivery, calm and efficient, while Matthew paced outside the bedroom door. The labor was long and difficult, but when Hannah finally held their baby girl, every moment of pain was forgotten. "She is perfect," Hannah breathed, counting tiny fingers and toes. Matthew came in, his face streaked with tears. "Is she healthy?" "She is perfect," Hannah repeated. "Look at her." He sat on the bed beside them, staring at his daughter with wonder. "She is so small. All babies are small. What should we name her?" They had discussed names but never settled on one. Now, looking at the baby's scrunched-up face and dark hair, Hannah knew Rose, for new beginnings. "Rose Lewis. I love it." Rose was a happy baby, quick to smile and slow to fuss. She had Matthew's dark hair and Hannah's blue eyes, and both parents were completely besotted. Matthew would come in from a long day of work and immediately seek out his daughter, holding her and talking to her about the ranch. "She has no idea what you are saying," Hannah would tease. "She will learn. I am teaching her early." When Rose was 6 months old, Hannah discovered she was pregnant again. This time it was a boy, born in spring of 1881. They named him Thomas after Hannah's first husband. Matthew had suggested it. "He was part of your life and part of what made you who you are," Matthew said. "Our son should carry his name." Hannah loved him even more for that generosity. Thomas was a more serious baby than Rose had been, studying the world with solemn eyes. He looked more like Hannah, with lighter hair and delicate features, but he had Matthew's quiet strength. Even as an infant, 2 children kept them busy but happy. The ranch prospered. Matthew bought more land and increased the herd. Hannah's teaching classes grew as more families moved to the area. Mrs. Chen became like a grandmother to the children, doting on them shamelessly. In 1883, another daughter arrived. They named her Margaret after Hannah's mother. In 1885, a second son, James. The house that had once been quiet now rang with children's laughter and the chaos of family life. "This is what I dreamed of," Matthew said one evening, watching Hannah read to the children before bed. "Noise and disorder," Hannah teased. "Love, family, a house that feels like a home." The years passed quickly. Rose grew into a bright, curious girl who loved horses as much as her father. Thomas was quieter, bookish, spending hours reading in his favorite chair. Margaret was wild and fearless, always climbing trees or chasing the ranch dogs. James was sweet-natured and gentle, happiest helping his mother in the garden. Hannah looked at her children and could hardly believe this was her life. There were hard moments, of course. Sickness and accidents, fights and tears. But the good far outweighed the bad. In 1890, when Rose turned 10, she asked her mother about the past. "Did you always live here?" Rose asked. Hannah was mending a shirt. She set it down, considering how to answer. "No, sweetheart, I came here when I was 24. Were you always married to Pa?" "No. I was married before to a man named Thomas." Rose's eyes went wide. "You were married twice." "I was. My first husband died and I was very sad. I was going to leave independence forever, but your father rode up to the Stagecoach and asked me not to go." "Why?" "Because he loved me, even though we had never really talked. He took a chance and I am so glad he did." Rose was quiet for a moment. "Is that why my brother is named Thomas?" "Yes. Your father wanted to honor the man who came before him. Pa is a good man." "The best," Hannah agreed. That evening Hannah told Matthew about the conversation. "She is getting old enough to understand," Matthew said. "Soon all of them will be." "I know. I want them to know the truth. That life can be hard, but it can also be beautiful. That love can come more than once. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is take a chance on happiness." Matthew pulled her close. "Do you ever regret staying?" "Never. Not for a single moment." The children grew and eventually left home one by one to start their own lives. Rose married a rancher from Colorado and moved west. Thomas went to St. Louis to become a lawyer. Margaret shocked everyone by becoming a teacher and moving to California. James stayed closest, buying land nearby and raising cattle. Matthew and Hannah grew old together on the ranch. His hair turned gray, then white. Her face gained lines from smiling. They slowed down, letting younger people take over the harder work. But they still rode out together on clear days, two figures on horseback against the endless prairie. Mrs. Chen had passed away peacefully in 1895, and they buried her near the cottage she had loved. New people came to work the ranch, but none ever replaced her. In 1910, on their 30th wedding anniversary, Matthew and Hannah sat on the porch where they had spent so many evenings. They were 64 and 58 respectively, weathered but healthy. 30 years, Hannah said. "It feels like both forever and no time at all." "I would do it all again," Matthew said. "Every single day, even the hard parts, especially the hard parts. They made the good parts sweeter." Hannah leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you remember that first day, when you stopped the stagecoach? Every detail. You looked so shocked." "I was terrified. I thought you were crazy." "I was crazy, crazy in love." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over land they had worked and loved for decades. Their children were spread across the country, living their own lives, but they came home often, bringing grandchildren who ran shrieking through the house and barn. "Do you think you will ever stop loving me?" Hannah asked, a question that was half teasing, half serious. Matthew turned to look at her, his storm-gray eyes still clear and sharp. "Not if I live 1,000 years. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, even better than this ranch. The ranch is just land. You are my heart." Hannah kissed him, soft and sweet. 30 years and she still felt that spark, that sense of rightness when they touched. They sat on the porch until the stars came out, holding hands like young lovers. The prairie wind whispered through the grass, carrying the scent of sage and wildflowers. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. The night was full of sound and life. In 1918, Matthew fell ill. It started as a simple cough, but it worsened quickly. The doctor came and spoke seriously about weak lungs and pneumonia. Hannah nursed him day and night, refusing to leave his side. Their children came home, gathering around their father's bedside. "I am not afraid," Matthew told Hannah one night when they were alone. "I've had a good life. The best life, because of you. Do not talk like that. You are going to be fine." But they both knew the truth. He was 72 and his body was tired. "Promise me something," he said. "Anything. Do not stop living when I am gone. You have years left. Fill them with joy, not grief." Hannah could not speak. Tears streamed down her face. "Promise me," Matthew insisted. "I promise." He died 3 days later peacefully with Hannah holding his hand. She felt the moment his spirit left, felt the profound absence where his love had been. But she also felt gratitude. 40 years together. 4 children. A lifetime of love. True to her promise, Hannah did not withdraw from life. She stayed on the ranch, which was now run by James and his family. She taught her grandchildren to ride. She quilted and gardened and read. And every evening she sat on the porch and talked to Matthew as if he were still there beside her. "I miss you," she would say to the wind. "But I am all right. You made sure of that." Hannah lived to be 83, dying peacefully in her sleep in 1935. Her children and grandchildren gathered for the funeral, celebrating a woman who had survived loss and found love twice, who had built a family from heartbreak and courage. They buried her beside Matthew, under a cottonwood tree on the ranch they had built together. The headstone was simple. Hannah Abbott Lewis, beloved wife, mother, and friend, 1852 to 1935. She chose love. Years later, her great-grandchildren would ask about the story of how their great-grandparents met. And they would be told about a widow leaving on the last stagecoach, about a cowboy who rode up and said, "Don't go," about a love that changed everything. The ranch still stood, passed down through generations, a testament to what Matthew and Hannah had built. The land was still worked and cherished. The house still welcomed family home. And on quiet evenings, if you sat very still on the porch, you could almost hear their voices in the wind, laughing and talking, forever young and forever in love. The story became legend in Independence. The romantic tale of the widow and the cowboy, of a split-second decision that led to a lifetime of happiness. Young people would visit the ranch, hoping to see where the famous love story unfolded. Old-timers would remember Matthew riding hell-bent into town that July morning, determined to stop a woman he barely knew from leaving. "Craziest thing I ever saw," they would say. And the best, because sometimes love requires courage. Sometimes it requires faith in something you cannot see or prove. Sometimes it requires riding up to a stagecoach and saying, "Don't go to a stranger." And sometimes, if you are very lucky, that stranger says yes. The prairie wind still blew across the land, carrying stories and secrets. The creek still bubbled over stones. The wildflowers still bloomed in spring. And somewhere in the vast expanse of earth and sky, 2 souls rode together, free and happy and eternal. Their love story was complete. It had been written in the dust of Missouri roads and the grass of the open prairie. It had been built through years of work and laughter, sorrow and joy. It had been lived fully, held gratefully, and ended peacefully. And it would never be forgotten. The ranch house stood solid against the sunset, windows glowing with warm light. Inside, James's grandchildren were setting the table for dinner, continuing traditions started decades before. They would eat together, talk and laugh, then sit on the porch watching the stars, just as Matthew and Hannah had done, just as their children had done, just as future generations would do. The legacy was not just land or buildings. It was love. The kind of love that risks everything, that chooses courage over fear, that says don't go when it would be easier to say nothing at all. Matthew's carved wooden horse, the one he made that first winter with Hannah, sat on the mantelpiece. It had been passed down through the family, a symbol of patience and craft and the quiet work of building a life. Rose's daughter now owned it, and she would pass it to her own children someday. Thomas's law books lined shelves in St. Louis, used by his children who followed in his footsteps. Margaret's letters from California, full of adventure and independence, were treasured by her descendants. James's ranch thrived next door, his cattle mingling with the original Lewis herd, and Hannah's quilts, beautiful and intricate, covered beds across 3 states. Each stitch a meditation, each pattern a story. The blue wedding quilt, carefully preserved, hung in the ranch house parlor, a reminder of that April day in 1880 when 2 people became one. The Methodist Church in Independence still had records of the marriage. Matthew Lewis to Hannah Abbott, April 15, 1880. The minister's handwriting was neat and precise, but gave no hint of the passion and devotion that union represented. The town itself had changed over the years, growing from a frontier settlement to a proper city. The mercantile where Hannah once worked was long gone, replaced by newer buildings. The stagecoach route was defunct, replaced by trains and eventually automobiles. But the cemetery remained, peaceful and well-tended, with 2 graves side by side under the cottonwood. Visitors would sometimes stop there, reading the inscriptions. Matthew's was equally simple. Matthew Lewis, 1848 to 1918. He asked her to stay. Together, the headstones told a story. A complete story, with a beginning in courage and an ending in peace, and a middle filled with everything that makes life worth living. On the 70th anniversary of their wedding, the family gathered at the ranch for a reunion. Nearly 100 people came, spanning 4 generations, all connected by the love of 2 people who had taken a chance on each other. Rose's granddaughter, who bore an uncanny resemblance to Hannah, stood up to speak. "Our great-grandparents taught us that love is a choice. Not a feeling that happens to you, but a decision you make every day to stay, to try, to build something bigger than yourself." Everyone raised their glasses in a toast, to Matthew and Hannah, to love and courage, to the power of saying don't go and the bravery of saying I will stay. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Rose's granddaughter walked out to the meadow where Matthew had first kissed Hannah. Wildflowers still grew there, thick and fragrant. She sat in the grass and looked up at the stars, the same stars that had witnessed a lifetime of love. She thought about her great-grandmother who had lost a husband and found the strength to leave everything behind, who had been stopped by a man brave enough to speak his heart, who had chosen to stay and see what might bloom from such unlikely seeds. And she thought about her great-grandfather who had loved a woman he barely knew, who had risked rejection and ridicule, who had built a legacy of devotion. Their story had shaped everyone who came after them. It had taught generations about courage and faith. It had shown that the greatest love stories are not without pain, but that the pain can be transformed into something beautiful. The wind rustled through the grass, warm and gentle. In that moment, it was easy to believe that love never truly dies, that it echoes forward through time, touching lives decades and centuries later. That Matthew and Hannah were still here somehow, in the land they loved and the family they created. As dawn broke over the prairie, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, the ranch came to life once more. Horses nickered in the corral, roosters crowed, children woke and stumbled sleepily to breakfast. Life continued as it always does, but the story remained, passed down through generations, told and retold, a reminder that sometimes the most important moment of your life arrives unexpectedly. That love can come from nowhere and change everything. that it is never too late to be brave. The widow was leaving on the last stagecoach. A cowboy rode up and said, "Don't go." She stayed, and they lived happily ever after. The end was also a beginning, as all good endings are. It was the completion of one story and the foundation of countless others. Every child born into that family carried a piece of Matthew and Hannah forward. Every act of courage echoed their brave choice. Every love story in their lineage could trace its roots back to that dusty July morning when everything changed. The ranch would continue for generations more, a living monument to their love. The land they had worked would feed and shelter their descendants. The values they had lived by, honesty and hard work and devotion, would guide their family through good times and bad, and somewhere in whatever lies beyond this life, Matthew and Hannah rode together still. Forever young, forever in love. Forever grateful that he had been brave enough to say, "Don't go," and she had been brave enough to stay. Their love story was complete, perfect in its imperfection, eternal in its mortality. It had been lived fully and ended well. And that was the greatest gift they could have given to those who came after. In the end, love is all that remains. Not wealth or fame or power, but the connections we forge, the lives we touch, the courage we show in choosing to love despite the risk. Matthew and Hannah understood that. They lived it, and their story would inspire others to be equally brave, for as long as stories were told, the prairie remembers. The wind carries their names. The stars watch over the land they loved. And in the hearts of their descendants, the widow and the cowboy live on, young and strong and unafraid, choosing each other again and again and again, forever.